Joining us now is Matt Krause, the Republican candidate for Attorney General. Matt, I just kind of want to start off because you're a state representative right now, and most people probably know you as their elected official for your area. But just tell people who may not be familiar with you, who is Matt Krause?
Yeah, Matt Krause, born in Tyler, Texas, grew up in San Antonio, Texas, live in the Fort Worth area of Texas. Constitutional attorney is my background, also teach some online courses for a university, have a beautiful wife, have 5 kids, and we're really excited about this race. We're going to do it as a team effort, and we're excited about going and exploring Texas as we take our message of being a faithful conservative fighter to the Republican primary voters of Texas.
And aside from being a state representative, had you always had interest in pursuing a higher office?
Not necessarily. I love being in the Texas House. I've always enjoyed getting to work on those issues, being a part of the policy making, getting to work with my colleagues. So wasn't necessarily looking for some higher office, but when we saw kind of how everything unfolded with the current occupant of the office and the other challengers who were in the field who I didn't think could be as successful in the primary, that's when we started looking at getting into it.
Now, speaking about those other challengers, all 4 of you in the race are pitching yourself as a conservative fighter. I know your kind of tagline is
That's right.
Faithful conservative fighter. What exactly differentiates you from the other candidates?
Yeah, I think it's that proven conservative record. This is my 5th term in the House, so about a decade's worth of experience. Whatever metric you want to use, whatever scorecard, whatever you want to look at, I have a proven conservative record. Always considered one of the top conservatives in the House, whether it's pro-life issues, Second Amendment issues, religious liberty, law enforcement, whatever the issue is, especially those that are important to Republican primary voters. I've been on the front lines fighting for them time and again, session after session, and I think it's that comfort level in knowing that you've got somebody who is that faithful conservative fighter who's going to be in that position that will resonate with the voters and draw them to support us.
And speaking about some of your achievements, you were one of the founding members of the House Freedom Caucus. What other accolades do you want to highlight that, proves that track record you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. This past session, we gave $100 million to the Alternatives to Abortion program, which is a great pro-life program. I was the lead amendment author in the House on the budget that took that money from what it was to $100 million. So continuing always to push those pro-life policies. We've been on the Second Amendment sanctuary state bill that passed this year. I've introduced that bill 5 sessions in a row. So already thinking about how we can use constitutional approaches to ensure that the federal government doesn't overreach, I've been at the forefront of that. So again, issue after issue, we passed the major religious liberty bill last session that's actually going to the Texas Supreme Court soon. And so no matter what the issue is, we've been on the front lines fighting for Texas and Texas values, and I think that is what sets us apart from everybody else.
Right now, talking about the incumbent, Ken Paxton, the current Attorney General, would you say there are anything that he's doing that you would do differently or any general policy differences that you might have?
Yeah, when it comes to me and the incumbent, there's definitely a different style and approach that would be used. I'm not sure there's necessarily any bigger policy differences. What I would say is I think there's been a cloud over that office for at least about a year now that keeps them from operating at its maximum effectiveness. What you're going to get with me is a office that's run with integrity, that's run with excellence, and our full focus will be going to protecting Texans, Texas values, and the Texas Constitution.
And speaking more about the incumbent, you endorsed him twice actually in 2014 and 2018 for Attorney General. I know we've talked recently and you said that the whistleblower allegations was something that kind of changed your mind about him, but he was also under indictment in the last election. So what makes you think that voters will change their mind this go around?
Well, that's up to me to make sure the voters do change their mind and give them the alternative, that faithful conservative fighter that they feel comfortable supporting. I do think you had with the whistleblower allegation something very serious. I mean, anytime you're charging and you have your top 8 lieutenants in your office resigning en masse and saying, we think that there was possible bribery, possible abuse of office, those are serious allegations. And I think that's when everybody started saying, okay, maybe there does need to be a changing of the guard here, because the FBI is investigating that right now. We don't know what they're going to come back and say, but it definitely, as we said earlier, puts that cloud and just takes away your effectiveness from being able to fully focus on the job at hand.
Because of that, because he's under federal indictment, do you think it's a distraction from his current duty as Attorney General, and do you think he should resign?
Well, I think we saw just a couple of weeks ago, his office put out a 374-page memo saying that he had done nothing wrong. Now, the merits of whether you vindicate yourself, put that aside, but your staff office is spending man hours and personnel and resources and time to compile a 374-page report. I think that shows that the focus, that's man hours that we could have been using to protect the values and liberties of Texans instead of crafting your own report and vindicating yourself. So I think in and of itself, that shows that the focus can't entirely be on the job at hand. You've got all these ancillary issues that you're taking care of.
Now, back to kind of the primary election race at hand. We know that former President Donald Trump endorsed Ken Paxton for his bid for Attorney General once again. That is still a very coveted name to have behind you in conservative Republican primary elections. Do you see that as a loss for you that you need to make up ground for in other ways?
Well, you know, it was interesting. A poll that came out from the Dallas Morning News a couple of weeks ago showed that before the endorsement, I think the incumbent was about 42%. After the endorsement, he was about 43%. So we didn't really see that much of a bump in there. But I would say for anybody who does feel like it's a very important thing to have the president's backing, you look at the endorsement that he gave to the incumbent, you can take out his name, put my name in there, and you're going to see that I fought for the exact same things. I've had proven success and a record of proven success on those things. So if the reasons that the president supported and endorsed Ken Paxton are important to primary voters, you can find in my candidacy the exact same kind of principles, value, and that same kind of fight that you're going to get without all the distractions that we've just talked about.
Now, talking about another one of your competitors who also has obvious large name recognition, that would be George P. Bush, who is, part of the Bush family dynasty here in Texas. With him and that name and what it has behind it, and as well as Paxton being the incumbent, that's an advantage inherently. How do you plan to fight that battle, if you will, of getting more name recognition across the state?
Hard work. That's what we're going to do. As you said, my 5 kids, my incredible wife, we're going to tour the state and tell people we're going to have to outwork everybody. And I'm okay with that. I've been a hard worker my entire life. As part of that fighter in us, we're going to fight for that. You're right. That name ID is pretty much universal in Texas. But we also saw in that same poll we were just referencing, the land commissioner actually lost 6% of his support from one poll to the next without that support really going anywhere. And so I think that shows maybe the connection with the grassroots and those Republican primary voters isn't there, even with universal name ID. That can be a pro and a con. Everybody knows your name, so they already have an opinion of you. And so we've seen him lose support lately. And so I think that shows that you need somebody else, that faithful conservative fighter that can inspire and excite the Republican primary voters. And I think that's what our candidacy provides.
And then another competitor, former Texas Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman, she is, pitching herself as the most qualified person for the job, given her record. So with her and then the other 2 that you're up against, what makes you the most qualified person for the job?
Yeah, and again, Justice Guzman's been on a statewide ballot multiple times, but she was only polling at about 5%, which is only a percentage or 2 ahead of where she was the previous poll. And that's been about with a third of a year them out campaigning full time. And so I think the grassroots and the primary voters are looking at, okay, we know they've been statewide candidates, but we don't have the comfort with them that they're that proven conservative fighter that we need. And I think that's what's going to set us apart. If you have too many concerns and questions about the incumbent with the FBI investigation and the cloud over there, and you want to go with somebody else, you want somebody that you can feel is going to give you that faithful conservative fighter in that office. Our proven record gives that, and that's what separates us from the 2 challengers.
All right, now if that messaging is successful and you win the primary and then win the election overall, what's going to be your first couple of priorities as Attorney General for Texas, and what do you see as the biggest challenges this office will hold for you?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think personnel is policy. So the first thing and the most important thing I think an Attorney General can do is build a good team around him or her that's going to help the office function excellently and with integrity. And so that would be our first goal, to hire the right staff. But then you're still going to have the crisis at the southern border. That's going to take a lot of effort. You're still going to have a Biden-Harris administration in D.C. that's probably looking to do things differently than we would do in Texas. And so you're going to have to remain vigilant against a overreaching federal government. And depending on what's happening at the state and local level too, you're going to have to make sure that you're vindicating the rights and liberties of Texans every day. And so that would be what we get up every day looking to do and being proactive about, not just waiting, but actually making sure we're being proactive in those efforts. And so that's what we'd be doing, and I think we would build a good team that would get that done, and the people of Texas could have a lot of confidence and a lot of excitement about the policies that that we would champion and that we'd be successful at championing.
All right, State Representative Matt Krause, Attorney General candidate for Texas. And then while we're still rolling, I'm going to ask you about the election
Perfect.
stuff, non-related to state of Texas. So you've been super involved in all of the elections bills, have voted for them in the Texas House. This audit of the 4 counties that we're seeing, Secretary of State just released some new details about that. Do you, first and foremost, do you see this as something that's, super necessary still? It's specific to the November 2020 election, but there have been also, small elections after and whatnot. So why just this focus on this one still?
I'm in favor of auditing the elections, whether it's 2020, 2016, 2024, going forward. I think it's kind of a trust but verify approach. And so I don't see why people would be nervous or upset that we're going to audit these elections. If it turns out that there was no fraud, then great. That just validates that everything went well. If it turns out there is fraud, that gives the legislature and the policymakers an idea of how we can go about combating those loopholes or those weaknesses in our election code to where the fraud was allowed to happen. So I see it as a worthwhile exercise, regardless of what happened in 2020 or what might happen in 2024. Let's audit. Let's audit all the counties, right? It doesn't have to be, 2 or 4 or 13 or whatever it is. I'm okay with auditing all of them because that helps give more security and more confidence to the citizens that their electoral system is working the way it should.
How is that any different from the canvassing that we see that happens after elections?
And that's a great question. I think it's a little bit more in depth. I think it's a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb that goes in there just to make sure everything adds up. The canvassing's a quick kind of survey overview to make sure everything seems to line up. I think the audit gives you a little bit more in-depth information that can be useful later on. And again, if it shows that nothing happened, that's great. If it shows that something did happen, that's good information for us to have so we can act on it.
Mm-hmm. And since this would be something that's coming from the legislature funding, are those conversations happening amongst lawmakers? Do we have any estimates of how much it'll cost based on other states and what we've seen there?
Yeah, I don't know if those, I haven't had those discussions. I think it's an important discussion. You always need to make sure that you have the resources to do it and do it well. It's more focused right now on the policy. Do we do the audits? Where do we do them? Is it certain select counties? Is it all over the state? And so it's more at a policy level at this point. Once we have that, I think we'll be able to find the resources to make sure we can do it and do it well.
All right. Anything else you want to say on that?
No.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, was anyone trying to talk to me? I heard some Okay, cool. All right, all set. Great, thank you so much.
Awesome,
all right.
thank you.
Awesome, I appreciate you coming in and answering
Yes.
those other questions.
Yeah,
for me
absolutely.
Today.
My pleasure.